Due to the nature of this video, spoilers will be discussed, so if you wish to watch the show and remain spoiler free, watch this video after finishing the show. You have been warned. A sound soul dwells within a sound mind and a sound body. In the original manga, this quote doesn't show up until volume 4, where it rears its head on one of DWMA's exam questions, and doesn't only come back until the final chapter, where it again shows up as the chapter title. You see it there as a closing statement in the manga, and as the story wraps up, it dawns upon you the way it beautifully encapsulates the thematic substance of the series itself. Those are the words embedded into the core of Soul Eater. You will see them in the intro to every episode in the anime, like a simple yet unforgettable mantra that makes up the soul of the series. But let's roll back a little. Soul Eater is a shonen manga set in a world shrouded by a Halloween-esque aesthetic, with tall, gothic drawings, pointy houses, Frankenstein-esque mad scientists, zombies, and Grim Reapers as professors, and a smiling, celestial body always looming in the sky. In an interview with JMAC, the author, Atsushi Okubo, mentions that most of the design elements for Soul Eater were chosen because he wanted to go for something different from your typical shonen manga. So we have a world governed by Shinigami, which at the time were unusual in shonen manga, a female protagonist, and a cartoony, Tim Burton-esque aesthetic. The original setup is pretty standard for a battle manga. Our main group of kids go to a school that trains them as this sort of elite police force to maintain world order, especially in matters related to madness with a capital M. For you see, in the world of Soul Eater, madness is an actual, magical force that can take hold of your body and influence your behavior. It's this substance that can even be solidified and used as a weapon by certain characters, such as Medusa and her crafted black blood. There are characters with a soul wavelength that's naturally resistant to madness, like Maka, and those who are particularly prone to it, like Dr. Stein. In this world, serial murderers and witches are shown to have succumbed to madness or have a very strong affinity to chaos, so they are targeted by the DWMA. It's our main character's job to hunt them, and as they do, have their weapons consume their souls so they can grow strong enough to become a death weapon. Throughout the story, we follow three teams of weapons and meisters. And while Maka is called the protagonist by the author Atsushi Okubo, Black Star and Death the Kid get just as much focus, so it wouldn't be too far off to say that the manga has three main protagonists. Each group is introduced to us in a way that easily showcases us their strength, and more notably, their weaknesses, particularly their mental weaknesses, some of which heavily hint towards mental disorders. It's these mental hang-ups and how the narrative, and as an extension the characters themselves, as a team and as individuals, lead with them that makes Soul Eater a standout for me. Going through our protagonists as they are initially presented, we have Death the Kid. He's first shown as strong and capable, but his fixation on absolute order leads him to a crippling obsession with symmetry. This consistently gets in the way of his missions. It's later revealed that he's ailed with the madness of order, due to having been created from a part of Lord Shinigami, an origin that influences his behavior. Black Star. He is the last survivor from an extremely strong assassin clan. That makes him a beast in battle. But his unmatched egotism and insatiable need to show off and be the center of attention not only tend to ruin his solo missions, but also get in the way of any kind of teamwork. To the point where, early in the series, he's infamously recognized as being an undesirable teammate for most of his peers. And then we have our main protagonist, Maka, who's introduced as this normal girl whose only standout point is her diligent honor student persona. She works extra hard to excel academically, and as a Meister, she tries to keep up with her mother's legacy, but tends to fall short due to her inexperience and her easily high-strung emotions, which usually result in an inability to keep a cool head in critical moments. One of Soul Eater's most interesting elements is its power system, or rather how the writer uses it as a mechanism to channel the story's themes. As Meisters grow, their soul wavelength gets bigger and stronger. This wavelength can also be amplified by their weapons through what's called soul resonance. A Meister's battle powers and strength will increase the more synchronized the soul is between them and their weapons. It's very common for shonen series to give their protagonist a certain character flaw that they need to defeat in order to get stronger. Deku needs to shed his mental insecurities and weaknesses in order to become a hero worthy of his quirk. Naruto needs to shed off his childish desire to show off in order to mature into the Hokage's role. Ichigo needs to shed off his loner attitude and grow to believe in his friends and work with them. All these main characters are shown shedding off their character flaws in order to develop into a stronger version of themselves, and ultimately become the heroes of their own world. But this is the point where Soul Eater completely took me by surprise. You see, the characters in Soul Eater do have character development. They grow throughout the story and ultimately become a better version of themselves. But the impressive thing is that they don't really erase their character flaws. The narrative doesn't require them to. And in fact, it's through learning how to understand themselves, how to cope with their own faults, their strengths, and how to work with them that the characters manage to reach their ultimate potential. We see this alternate type of character development consistently happening for all three main characters. Death the Kid's perfectionism and obsessive desire for absolute symmetry, for perfect order, is a standout character trait that we see consistently mess up almost any mission that he takes on. From the start, he's shown to be the already strongest and most competent of the main trio, but this critical flaw gets in his way to the point that he's rendered useless. It's interesting to note how, despite usually being presented in a comedic way, the series doesn't shy away from showing how much of a hindrance it is in his life, both in important, life-threatening scenes,
not symmetrical at all. What a perfect pose! The very definition of symmetry. Oh dear.
as well as his day-to-day, mundane life. Notably, this trait isn't really something Kid ever sheds off or overcomes, but rather, through understanding himself as well as through his bonds with both his weapons, Patty and Liz, and later, Maka and Blackstar, Kid manages to find ways to work with his own flaws. It's this very obsession with absolute order that leads him to question the current status quo, and to the realization that it's causing so much suffering for those who deviate from the norm. The aberrant, those persecuted for being susceptible to madness, especially the Witch Society. Death the Kid's initial character flaws leads him, and as an extension, the entire DWMA, into a path of progress, into a better order for the world where those marginalized can live without hiding in fear. Blackstar starts out as strong but deeply egoistical and narcissistic. His desire to be the center of attention, to hog the spotlight and be the one dealing the finishing blow, gets in the way of his missions. He has no interest in teamwork, as that would mean sharing the spotlight and generally needing Tsubaki's advice to succeed in fights. These flaws come to a special peak when confronting the swordman, Mifune, for the first time, who harshly criticizes him and his skills, and notes that his only redeeming quality is his weapon, Tsubaki. This leads him to some introspection on the meaning of strength and what exactly he wants so desperately. After a series of tough fights, and thanks to his strong bonds with Tsubaki, Maka, Soul, and especially Kid, he resolves that all he wants is to help out his friends. It's only when he finds his true resolve that he's able to unlock his real potential. His drive for strength, his desire to stand out, none of that ever disappears. He doesn't end up becoming a human to match the gods despite his flaws, but because of them, by channeling those traits and feelings in a productive way. By the end of the series, we have a Blackstar who is also able to recognize his limits, realizing that he wouldn't be able to take on the Kinshin without Maka's help, and realizing the worth of people like it and their drive to change the world, without letting that recognition limit his potential and growth, but rather motivating him to push himself further.
Let's go, Soul Resonance!
Maka starts out the series diligent but inexperienced. She's kind and empathetic, but has a high strong emotion that can stray her off the path to victory. And more often than not, seems to need Soul to hold her back from making a stupid, reckless decision that may cost them any given fight. Despite having the lowest power level out of the three main kids, a fact that, surprisingly for a protagonist in this genre, doesn't really change throughout the series, she represents the heart of Soul Eater's thesis. She's chosen as the group leader by Stein because she's the one who first comes to realize that she doesn't need to get rid of Kid's compulsive obsession with symmetry or keep Blackstar's egoistical desires in check. She realizes that instead of pushing others to be something they're not, a much stronger soul resonance can be achieved by actually understanding and respecting her teammates.
I don't need to force myself to understand them. I just need to accept who they are. And believe.
People who are alike couldn't make this harmony. The secret lies in our differences.
It's still a rough attempt, but you all pass. This team's leader is Maka.
It's not a coincidence that Maka and Soul's particular set of skills are what managed to create a particularly strong soul resonance for the entire team, one that blocks outside madness and keeps its interference in check, and lets their teammates reach extra levels of power. The entire team's differences are what give each of them their own unique strengths and weaknesses. Soul Eater ultimately isn't about trying to change others, or even yourself. It's about understanding both yourself, your teammates, your friends, and respecting your partners. Or rather, especially because complete understanding is impossible, Soul and Maka's ability to compromise, to understand and respect her teammates' flaws and strengths lets her bring out the best of the team. Her empathy, courage, and ability to inspire are her main strengths. So we've come this far without mentioning one of the most important central elements to the entire story, Crona. Our conflicted anti-villain, child of one of the series' biggest villain, Medusa. Much of the series is dedicated to fighting and ultimately trying to help and save Crona from Medusa's destructive grip. Crona's arc shows another layer to the series' power system, madness and its allure, as a portrayal of mental health. Crona's core story is one of trauma, neglect and parental abuse. Having been conceived as a pawn in Medusa's grander scheme to possess the Kishin, they were abused from an early age as part of their training. They're forced to kill small, defenseless animals, and if they refuse, are rejected attention and food for several days until they comply.
I'm scared of everyone. I need to learn to deal with people better. But to do that, I need power.
Goofy?
Do you want to know where the real hell is hiding? It's inside your head.
By the time we first get to see Crona in the main story, they're already a mess, suffering from extreme anxiety, completely retreated within themselves, completely shutting themselves off from their surroundings, and no sense of self-worth. All of this on top of being bullied by the existence created from the black blood, injected and fused into their body by Medusa, almost as if a physical manifestation of their trauma. The only desire Crona shows in life is to escape from any and all external stimuli, to retreat to the depths of their own psyche, away from everyone, where they will be safe, a shell to protect them from suffering. The black blood serves as Crona's weapon, and despite their hang-ups, when fighting with it, Crona is extremely strong. They've been shown to be able to overpower most of the protagonists' individual pairs. To Crona, the black blood serves as a coping mechanism, but the way they interact with it, it's toxic. We see it as a contrast to most of our weapon meister pairs. Whereas their bonds serve to strengthen their own psyches, Crona uses the black blood as a crutch, as a way to shield themselves from all outside interference, to hold up between themselves. Of course, not even this helps Crona get the respite they so desire, with the black blood's physical form manifesting to torture them, to insult them, and reinforce all their insecurities, acting as a double-edged sword.
Don't be so frightened. You're just a little shaken up now that the line you had drawn is erased. I promise you. Now I understand it. Your soul wavelength. It's that no one ever took the time to deal with you.
After Maka and Crona's second fight, Maka comes to understand Crona's past, and decides to hold out a helping hand. Crona is undefeated through violence, but through kindness and support, and for the first time in their life, Crona sets on a path to self-healing. This is short-lived though, as Medusa's toxic roots are deeply ingrained in Crona. Medusa manages to get them back on their side without much effort. Crona doesn't believe they can rely on their new friends, or anyone for that matter, because a lifetime of abuse has convinced them of such. They're not strong, reliable, or lovable enough for anyone to want them on their side. It's easy for someone with a past of trauma to fall back into self-destructive patterns, and the same goes for Crona. The series finale is dedicated to the last rescue mission for Crona, with our main team going above and beyond to help them out. Again, Crona's strength, born from their coping mechanism developed through years of trauma, are overwhelming. Not something that can be beaten with brute force. It's only with kindness, support, and understanding that our protagonists finally pull through. It's through the conclusion of Crona's arc that we finally get to understand the meaning of madness and its allure as per Soul Eater's teams. We meet a lot of characters who are falling or have already fallen to madness, including some of the main characters themselves. Madness speaks out at their flaws, their fears, desires, selfishness, and magnifies it to the point that the characters turn their back on the entire world and nurse this obsessively. To hold within yourself, embrace this one extreme feeling, and cut off the rest of the world. When we see how these characters falling into their madness is presented in Soul Eater, one thing becomes clear. The series doesn't ask the character to completely shed their character traits. What it's saying is that the real path to growth, the real path to strength, is to challenge your madness in healthy ways through your bonds with those important to you. From Blackstar's egotistical desire for power, and how it becomes a strength after his final realization through his encounters with Mifune and his bonds with Kid and Maka, to Kid's compulsive desire for order and what it becomes when left unchecked, versus the good it can bring when he channels it to better the current status quo, to Soul and Maka's own fears, which leads them to abandon people they love, and how it can turn into trust and strengthen their own partners. We even see the same thing consistently with side characters like Kim and Ox. None of them have to shed who they are to develop, but through their bonds, channel these feelings to strengthen their characters, their souls. After all, a sound soul dwells within a sound mind and a sound body. that's the end of the video. One more thing I want to mention about Soul Eater is that I really love the character interactions of the main party. The lack of any romantic tension or any hardcore rivalry gives way to a more lighthearted and easygoing friendship. We see so many scenes of them just hanging out and having fun, which is really refreshing to see in this genre. Anyways, just remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
Royal Thunder!